Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto, and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now, we are joined by Refracted Curvature, Arwin, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Yeah, let's go.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good to have you. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Welcome. Glad we're streaming. Got lots of technical issues before we started. Could be internet related, could be encode related. We just don't know. Hopefully this stream will be successful. We shall see. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping questions, but you can probably tell from the thumbnail, which I did put a little bit of effort into before even starting the live stream, which I don't typically do. There's not normally a theme to any of the shows. You don't know who's going to join. You don't know what's going to come up. Housekeeping is about the only consistent thing that we have. But that aside, I did actually want to have a theme to today's show because it's show number 2001. So if you can't figure out what we're going to have a theme with, then maybe you shouldn't be watching. I don't know. Either way, we're going to do a bit of housekeeping first. So let's do a bit of housekeeping. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Nope.
There is none, Nathan. Gas law and any description of gas, it requires a volume. But the pressure, it has a force against the walls of its container. So if we're going to measure that volume or the pressure, we'll need a container.
What about any evidence of the distance to the sun?
It's way too misty for that today.
How would you measure it?
I need to know what it is first, if you're asking me specifically. I have no idea how I would go about measuring a distance to that thing that we call the sun, as I don't know what it is to go about measuring it.
Well, you can see something in the distance and not know what it is, but still measure a distance to it with an angle.
If I know the distance to it, or I know the height of it, if I don't know what it is, I can infer that I don't know the height, so you're inferring that I do know the distance, and I can measure the angle, right?
You're going to have to be
I'm talking about...
to size anything up about it.
One more time, Arwin?
You're going to have to be able to reach it to be sure about anything about it.
No, he's juxtaposing that with something... You're not listening. He's not doing that. He's juxtaposing that with something that we can measure with an angle. Just listen up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, but you could measure with an angle to an apparent location, no?
We're not talking about... Second time's a charm. Just listen to what John...
3 Arwinian units.
Just listen to what John's saying. Go ahead, John.
Right. I'm talking about terrestrial measurements, right? Like you see something in the distance, and you can measure an angle to it. You can establish a ratio of height based on that angle. Off a flat plane, of course. But you can't do that with the sun.
Did you all follow along that time? He's talking about the ability to measure with an angle something that you have a known distance to, or if you know the height of it. And in a terrestrial sense, you can do that. That's no problem. You don't need to know what something is, as long as you've got a value. Well, in the case of the sun, we don't have any of those things. Hence, you need Huygens to assume the size of Venus, for example, to extrapolate out the scales given to him by Kepler in order to assert that we've got a distance to the sun. Well, that's useless.
Well, there is angle consistency that you can rely on, at least, right?
No, not Huygens. No, Kepler. Maybe you can take the angles off a flat plane, and you can put them into a description of orbital motion. Well, yes, you can do that with just the angles. You don't need anything else. You don't need to assert the distances either. It just gives you scale. But that's just Kepler. I'm talking about Huygens to get a distance to the sun.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, this actual distance to the sun, it's whatever they want it to be, and that's why there's been this distance to the sun inflation, over the centuries.
We've got one more housekeeping question, unless anybody thinks something's relevant to the general topic that we're going to be discussing today, which is any scientific evidence of gravity.
Yes, it contains the gas pressure on Earth. Sorry.
Well, if depends if we are working on the really easy level or not.
Well, Arwin isn't. He just said, well, we've got the gas pressure on Earth. Yes, we have. That's not in any way an assertion of a proof of gravity, though, unless you beg the question, which you absolutely will. That's why you've said it.
What is gravity? What the scientific evidence of what? What the hell is gravity?
It's the force that's manifested by the non-force of gravity.
Not listening, Neil. Go ahead, Darwin.
It's the force manifested by the non-force of gravity that is capable of keeping the gas pressure stuck to a ball versus a giant outer space. Of course, the ball is presupposed, by the way.
As is the outer space.
Naturally.
Lots of assumed circumstances in an assumed area with assumed ignorance of laws of thermodynamics. We've got gas go down, go boom, boom. Thank you, Arwin. You happy, Neil? That's what you were talking about when we talk about gravity. I'm happy to accept that as an answer. Anyway, any scientific evidence? So why those three questions? Distance to the sun, gas pressure without a container, and gravity. Why would those be the questions, given that the show number's 2001?
2001
Space Oddity.
Space Oddity, did you say?
Yeah.
I did put Space is Odd as the title of today's show. So
I was going with
David
9/11. I
Bowie.
was way off.
you were going with 9/11. Did you not see the thumbnail?
I see it.
Yeah, not because of the exactly because of yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, we can all quit the music. I'll get a copyright strike. We're all that pitch perfect. So, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yes, Twin Towers, all that kind of stuff. 2001, as in that particular year, that's what occurred. I don't know if any conspirators are amongst us that want to draw connections. Feel free. You're welcome to. You might get laughed at. But what we can talk about, or I think is much more pertinent, is the movie itself and what it is, what it represents. And as much as Kubrick's incorporated quite some depth into the story, which a lot of people find boring because it's just surface level propaganda, if you want to take it as what it is, just a boring space movie. Now, there is a lot more to it. And if you do want to know more intricacies about specifically 2001, just go and watch Rob Ager, who takes apart the multiple levels of the movie that Kubrick created and the genius of Kubrick in his movie making. Now, Rob Ager does a great job of that. That is not something I'm going to attempt here either. All we're really going to talk about is the need for the movie because of what it represents. It's space propaganda to create the illusion that we can do all the things that exist in the movie. That is to say, travel around balls in a sky vacuum with orbital motion and presumed distances to bodies that we can and do travel to. So all of that in the movie is precisely what we brace against by debunking it. When we say you can't have gas pressure without a container, if the sky was a vacuum, as is asserted in the propaganda that you've been brought up with to believe that is the case, like 2001, or Star Wars, even though it's a lot more fictional in nature, whimsical if you want. The nature of 2001 is there for one purpose. If it's government funded and government approved, which it is, it's there to propagandize the masses into believing that there's a sky vacuum that you can travel to. Now, prior to all of the propaganda that NASA incorporate, but even before NASA, when you've got heliocentric propaganda, that's come along. Oops, bashing my mic. That's come along. Stop being so animated with my hands while I'm talking. That's come along at a time when the maps show the way the world as it works. You know, it came upon Quantum Eraser's show yesterday, or the day before yesterday, rather, when he was talking about third world countries. You're like, now they don't call them third world countries anymore. They might still be noted that way on some old maps, but they're called developing countries now. Well, why? Well, because that old way of describing the discovery of new worlds would be ascribable in that context when you call it a third world country. Because back in the day, we used to travel out towards space. And in some of the old books that 10th Man has gone through, it's still described that way, going back not more than 100 years. They describe space as the area of unknown territory, potentially, beyond the horizon. And as they've travelled into space, they've discovered what they put on the maps, the new worlds. Now that changes, and obviously to bolster it, we have the propaganda that we're discussing today with 2001: A Space Odyssey. The need to take that which has been shown and demonstrated in history, in terms of the discovery of new worlds, very literally, to taking those new worlds to a place you can't go. A farcical place when you think about it, because it's an empty area above your head we see as the sky or the stars at night. Well, that empty area of twinkling lights is now the land that we can potentially travel to. Well, that's all achieved through things like 2001. There's my hopefully substantial enough preamble to keep you all juicy and interested in discussing this. Hello, by the way, Adam.
Afternoon. It's
You have a
also
thumbnail?
Well, it's actually,
pre-warning, is it not,
Yeah.
about AI, which, if you think back to when that was made, it's quite spooky that it's predicting what we're fearing.
Adam, with his advanced intellect, taking this to where I thought we would be ending the discussion. Very good, very good. Like minds and all that. I like it. Yeah. I mean, we can start there. I don't mind. Yeah. Again, if you want to get more information on this, go to Rob Ager's video and just look at how he breaks it down. Because if I say anything now that even infers that I know about this stuff in terms of the layers of Kubrick's genius, it's all come from Rob Ager originally. So you might as well just disclaim. I may as well just disclaim that in terms of the letters. A one on from IBM, HAL. You know, it's his nod to IBM and their stranglehold over the people with their technology, and it is a slight poke at that when you see the subtlety of what he does and how he shuts down. There's a certain song that gets played as well as he's pulling all the cards out, which is linked in some way to one of the first computers. I forget the connection. Again, refers back to Rob Ager for more detailed information. But Adam, go ahead.
Well, other than the space, the other thing that I remember of that film, I've only seen it a couple of times, is, again, the pre-programming that it was an infinite regression fallacy, isn't it? But ultimately, they're reinforcing evolution, as in evolutionary upgraded by aliens.
Correct. Star Child demonstrates that at the end, correct.
It's loaded, actually, isn't it? With things you must believe.
I mean, there's a bit of a spoiler if you do go and see Rob Ager's interpretation, and it is originally his. If anybody else claims it, they're lying. Which is to say that the monolith, by his interpretation, is the screen. Now, if you imagine what the dimensions of the monolith are and then turn it 90 degrees, what you're looking at is the screen. And there's even a scene right at the end, which sort of matches up with the, when he's in a spacesuit, but he's seeing himself as old. There's a point where he reaches out towards the monolith, and in the framing of Kubrick's genius, he touches the edge of the cinema screen. If you were sat at the cinema watching that, the way it would present to you is he's literally, as it cuts from him reaching towards the monolith, he touches the edge of the screen. Very clever stuff. If you've never noticed it, you will now. Again, Rob Ager, not me. But just genius. This is Kubrick. We got to get away from Kubrick and get onto the propaganda, Adam. AI is definitely tied to that, though. HAL, IBM, the current raft of artificial intelligence that we have. This was his warning towards that, was what you said, Adam. That is definitely on topic because it's, that's tied to the propaganda, and Kubrick's trying to expose it. I don't necessarily feel that he was trying to expose anything about space beyond his errors of cinematography that were intentional. Things like the space station spinning one way in one frame, and then he cuts to a different angle, but it's literally rotating in the complete opposite direction. Those sorts of errors are way, way, way a bit above and beyond what Kubrick is capable of, therefore can only be interpreted as intentional errors that he's put in there. So then you start questioning why. Well, when we're in a day and age when we've got lots of people who look at space footage from NASA and point out continuity errors like that, it does kind of lend itself to, is that a nod to look for the continuity errors? Because he's highlighting how he's got them in there clearly intentional because he's just too good a filmmaker to not get that right. Do you know what I mean? Having a space station physically spin the other way means he's spun the model the other way and then cut to a different angle. That took effort to have the continuity error. Anyway, I digress, Adam. HAL, IBM, artificial intelligence, space propaganda. That's what we want to focus on here.
It's in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, isn't it, this film?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I look on when I'm thinking about artificial intelligence. You're coming out of a time where it's robbing a robot and stuff like that. So for him to presenting this in basically what we are using, it makes you wonder what level of technology they had at that point. Because you're looking at Kubrick, and he's a spoiler alert, isn't he? Whether that's for the establishment or whatever, it's just making you accept these things. Some will come to fruition, like AI. Some are just there to reinforce the belief, like space travel. But it's just interesting that, to me, that AI is in there in such a way that it matches the fears we have, 40 years later.
Yeah, and starting around the time of the date of the movie, starting around 2001 would be when that sort of technology was starting to become prevalent. In other words, it matches his timeline perfectly. But again, it's a government propaganda movie to all intents and purposes. So some of those plots and narratives aren't necessarily Kubrick's doing. They want that in there, and they would want it in there for the reasons that, as you've just described, is now the case. People are scared of AI. Well, why is that useful? Why would you want people scared of anything? Well, because it's the best technique to keep people under control. Fear. It might be the case that had it not been for things like Kubrick and HAL, we'd be indifferent to the AI, which, to be perfectly frank, again, Rob Ager has this attitude. I'm just thinking of attitudes that he has because he's on my mind, obviously talking about 2001 analysis. But he's got a similar attitude towards AI. It's like, what have you got to be fearful of? This jumped up search engine? You're kidding me? It's only ever garbage in, garbage out. That will never change. So to fear that it's going to become sentient, you're like, oh God, get over yourself. But we've all been programmed and brainwashed to believe that we should fear it. Again, why? Useful. Keep us under control.
Right, when we have a much more realistic threat to worry about, and that is the average intelligence of politicians.
Yeah, people.
They could actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. You should be more concerned with the psychopathy of the people in charge. But we know there's various different things, including this, that keep us well and truly distracted from the other people right next to us, that there's a good chance of keeping you under control. But they're just a dude standing next to you when you actually boil it down. And you were talking about this yesterday, Arwen, when you said about the Wizard of Oz and the dog pulling back the curtain. Well, metaphorically, when you're shoulder to shoulder with Oz, he's just a guy, isn't he? That's what half the illusion, half the fear-based mind control is down to little dick men that are scared of losing control. It's pathetic when you actually boil it down. I shouldn't smile about this. Oh, why am I laughing? I don't know why. It's because I look at the world in that way when I see people doing the do and conforming. And I used to, 10 years ago, get a bit upset about it. But now I don't. I just go, oh my God, the normies are sad. There's nothing you can do about it as far as I'm concerned. So you just resign yourself to it. And if you can't laugh, you'd cry. You know what I mean? For society. That said, a lot of my empathy in this particular subject's been washed away over the years, more specifically towards people who come and argue for a globe. You're arguing for your own servitude. You're arguing for your own fear-based mind control. And I just, in many ways, see that as pathetic. I shouldn't say it. This is the majority of the Western world. No wonder people don't want to... Nah, blame YouTube for the unsubscribing people that may not like what they hear when they get here. The growth of the channel is all that matters, and we're growing. What's up, hun? You off?
Well, look, intellectual slavery is a form of weakness. It's not necessarily pathetic because it might just be too complicated for you to figure it out, or you can't handle it. But it's certainly a sign of weakness because the not being able to handle it is also like you don't wanna, right? The people, even the ones that aren't super smart, they still have those choices to break through that impulse from the inside, like, no, and actually like take an honest look and then make an honest comparison, right? But because they are too weak to do that, to actually be honestly curious and size things up honestly, that's what keeps them weak. So it's sort of a cowardice thing in a way. But I mean, when you're just intellectually way in over your head, that makes it all even harder.
Plus, they brainwash us from birth, so it's you know the old adage that it's easier to con someone than convince them they've been conned. Well, if you've been conned from birth, then that old adage applies the moment you're in society with respect to globe, Earth, and space.
Right, and if you're continually being surrounded by it as well, then you get like the whole group effect too. You don't want to be the one person out, because that is what it will feel like at first.
The other thing to highlight in terms of the quality, because Adam was pointing out that the predictive programming element of Kubrick showing you what space travel is going to be in 2001 is also nicely taken apart by Dilly Gill, who occasionally gets a mention on this show. Nearly 90 people watching. Please share the show. Smash that share button. Very warm welcome if you've just joined us on show 2001.
That thing is, I think to people in the 60s and 70s, that's what was expected. Remember, we've just landed on the moon. Yeah. So this level of progression is exactly what is expected. It's not really fantasy, this, is it? This is a tomorrow's world sort of shot to the public. Certainly when I was a kid, this is what you're expecting. By the time I was 50, which I am now, we should have had flying cars. We were promised them, and do you know what I mean? This is not a fanciful thing. It's a little of a warning tale, but isn't it? But these are the things. This is what I say. The mainstream tomorrow's world's telling you. This is what the world will be like by 2001.
A hoverboard, at least, flying cars, but at least a hoverboard. I mean, come on.
No, the Jetsons promised us flying cars, and that's the most disappointing thing.
I wish you guys would veer away from flying cars, because we're supposed to be flying around in a sky vacuum as far as 2001 is concerned. That notion is what's supposed to be commonplace. Now, it's only commonplace in the mind's eye of the public now. And here we are, telling them it ain't true. Getting shut down by
it's easy.
Please share the show.
It's easy to do. All you have to do is overcome the eccentricity of Earth.
Well, at least the one Luke Skywalker was driving in Return of the Jedi, right? And Endor, those were cool.
Sure. But with a propaganda movie like 2001, the mundane aspect of it is also drawn from NASA's boring missions that they put in front of the public. So I was just referencing Dilly Gill, who points out that Hollywood, in this case Kubrick's movie, aren't on the cutting edge of cinematography, as much as it may seem the case to the public. NASA are on the cutting edge of cinematography. They're the ones with the best lenses and the best equipment and the best cameras and the best editing studios, the best stages, and the most cutting edge tech. They're on the cutting edge, and Hollywood are behind them. There's a reason.
You know,
Go on.
well, that's interesting though, because you know it's real because it looks so fake. How long are they going to be able to stand behind that as a defense then?
Not for much longer. I don't know. I just think that the technology is the problem now. You know, people can see through the nonsense. I was about to reference Gravity in terms of people have seen the ISS and what they do and spin on high wire. And then Gravity comes out once Hollywood catches up with that tech from 10 years ago that NASA were using. Now, don't get me wrong, they were doing boring stuff like bubbles and in CGI and spinning around in their harnesses. But when you see Sandra Bullock doing exactly the same thing with a behind-the-scenes expose of how they do it by removing the ceilings, you only got to go and put 2 and 2 together. And if you can't, go and watch Dilly Gill do it for you. You know, he shows them removing the ceilings in post-production, or adding the ceilings in post-production and giving you a live view that's without the ceiling incorporated on the very thin high wire that they spin around on and do their CGI magic tricks on a monitor from some stage.
But they can do that live. They can remove aspects of the video live. If it's a certain color or it's in a certain position, they can do that live.
Yeah.
You know, it's like green screen technology. That's pretty old as far as that goes.
Which is what NASA lean on. So this is, again, credit to Dilly Gill, who points out that in terms of the action, what's going on camera, what are they filming, that's boring. They play, as he puts it, their cards very close to their chest. They're not chasing down aliens. No, they're eating a microwave dinner. They're not battling with lightsabers. They're climbing up to the top to get something out of a cupboard. That's the level that you get shown, right? And if they go out of their way, it's elaborate, they're doing a demonstration for children. Something mundane. Now that is them leaning on the technological aspects of the cinematography to convince you of what's occurring, not the action. That's not supposed to be engaging, as The Simpsons pointed out one day, when they're cut to a rocket launch and the batteries come out of the remote, and Homer and Bart fight over getting them back in because they can't be bothered watching NASA and their boring space launch, with a mathematician, a statistician, and another mathematician going off into space, prior to Homer going into space in that particular episode. But that particular boring aspect of NASA is intentional. You're only being sold on what the setting is, and that's all done with the cinematography.
That's right.
You know,
it's futurist. It's futurist. So it's like they're trying to make you consider what would this be like if my life was in this scenario. So they have to like show you something really boring because, well, people's lives can be really boring, and then you'll be like, oh, yeah, I do that too. I could be doing that in space. That's kind of what they're going for, right? Smooth you into it.
Well, they just want you to have it in your mind's eye. That's all it is. Space only exists in the mind's eye of the person that fantasizes about it. Now, they don't appreciate that it's a fantasy. At a base level, they might appreciate they've never been there. But we can go there would be their response. The royal we has been to space, therefore it's real. It's like, no, but it violates the second law of thermodynamics. If the sky was a vacuum, we'd all be dead. We'd have no gas to breathe. Gas expands to fill the space. That's how it behaves. The sky's not a vacuum. You know, now if they're going to fight their cognitive biases, they're going to go into what gravity can or cannot do as a non-force that maybe you can think of as a force.
right. And in that when they're talking about gravity, they're going to refer to eccentricity of things leaving Earth's gravitational field, right?
What, with respect to a flat plane in terms of the mathematical descriptions?
Yeah, they're going to have to utilize a horizontal to give it a eccentricity value.
But the public doesn't know that. They've only taken the steps of reification. The flat plane that's used to derive orbits, woohoo, we're over 100 viewers, 103. Thank you to all of you shared. Welcome if you've just got here. Please share the show. Yeah, they don't know that. They just have the reification. They have the fantasy, which is reinforced constantly by NASA, the only ones we can actually peg as liars, and the generalised movies and sci-fi and space stuff that you get in Fantasyland. They don't know that you're not suspending disbelief. You are suspending disbelief when you watch NASA, and, you're happy to accept the suspension of disbelief when you go and watch a Hollywood movie. The two are the same, but you don't realise that. You think one's real. Boring one.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to take away from the work they've done. They've really done a job on the public, But even when the boring parts, as you was talking about, when they're talking about like their parabolic trajectories and things like that, they're never using a globe for that,
Do you not think that's why you can't get hold of telemetry data? That it was better to look incompetent than have to show that you're working with a flat plane when you calculate out the distances and the journey mathematically. Like, hold on a second. The trajectory data would expose the flat plane that's used in the maths. So better to look incompetent in that regard. So, we lost it.
Possibly. I mean, I don't know, but to me, that telemetry data would be damnable from our position.
Yeah, well, it would prove a flat plane. You see, it would be there in the maths. I mean, there isn't any telemetry. Nobody's ever put pen to paper to make telemetry data to travel to the moon. It's utterly absurd. It's never existed because you can't do it. There is no journey from a flat plane derivation in a fantasy of a mathematics of an orbit to get to the moon. Now, the people who are going to infer that they've come up with the telemetry, that's silly. So my estimation would be there wasn't ever any telemetry. There's only ever the fraud. People think about the fraud and how the fraud's been portrayed. And they travelled to the moon, so they built the rocket and all the bits that they know about, and then they fill in the pieces. One of the bits is telemetry data. So they just lost it. It's like, you're just taking the narrative. What makes you think anybody ever put pen to paper to create this telemetry data when you know how absurd it is to infer that you can take measurements off a flat plane, give angular representation and scale through Kepler, and then infer that by reification you can travel out into an orbit scaled by Huygens?
But
you
Nathan,
wouldn't even put pen
fuel?
to paper. So it doesn't exist. We've never had telemetry data. No one's doing that. It's silly.
What about the fuel? The amount of fuel?
What about it? Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, we know we went to the moon because we know how much fuel we used.
Exactly.
That's an affirming the consequence.
They calculated it.
It's just
If they calculate it, they have to have done it, right?
Exactly.
They know how to calculate how much they needed.
If we can travel to the moon, then we will use X amount of fuel. We used X amount of fuel, therefore we travel to the moon. It's just your average standard run-of-the-mill affirming the consequent.
No, it's not affirming the consequent because we calculated the travel to the moon using a flat plane. Therefore, if we went to the moon, we live on a globe. Or that happened.
Which is why I'm suggesting there would never be any telemetry data created in the first instance. Because as soon as you start putting pen to paper and, seeing where the angles are coming from, you appreciate the absurdity of the journey that you're calculating. And you just stop. Like I say, I don't think there ever was any telemetry data. There wasn't a journey to the moon, that's for sure. So why would there be any telemetry data? All there is the perpetration of the fraud that is a necessity to convince the public that they went to the moon. Now, we know that's the case. So when you think in those terms, You go, well, if I was going to claim I was traveling to Narnia, let's just put it in this context, right? Now, I've got to not only suggest in the mind's eye of the person I'm convincing that Narnia is real, that may take X, Y, Z steps. But I've also got to convince them that the journey took place through the wardrobe. So I've got to give them some convincers, some warm coats, some snow at the back of a wardrobe, things like that. I've got to give them some convincers, and once that's been established, when they start asking further questions about, well, what about the temperature? What about the gas lamp you described and how it's got gas fed to it non-stop without any plumbing? How do all these things work? You start getting into the extension of the lie, which is obviously going to be that little bit more flimsy. But people then start taking the extension of the lie, in this case telemetry, and going, well, what happened to it? No, what happened to what? The extension of the lie that's a little bit flimsy? You're going to start going round the Reekin looking for the telemetry data they lost, or asking why they lost it. Like, they never went. Once you know that, you're like, I'm wasting my breath on liars, aren't I?
Maybe that was the painful process, Nathan, that they never had any telemetry data. That's the painful process.
Yeah, you did. It's on screen now.
What, be inspired?
No, that bit. The lady here. So this is apparently the telemetry data that was handwritten, isn't it?
I don't know if that photo is of anything. She looks like she's just holding a load of pizzas.
Could be, couldn't it? Telephone directories. Seeing how high she can stack them. But apparently that's what's written out. You know, that she convinced a lot. So don't say there's no telemetry data. There she is with it all written out by hand, so they could go safely to the moon.
Exactly. We had the telemetry data. Is much better when you've got a picture like this than, well, obviously we can't calculate how to travel based on orbits. They've been derived from a flat plane. We're not going to be spinning around it in an orbital motion when we turn that flat plane extremity at the equator, measured off a flat plane, into a sphere and put things in motion around it. That was only done so that we could figure out when Easter was. Why the hell would we be using that to derive a journey? It's absurd. Well, the public needs to think we've taken this journey. Give me a photo of a tart holding a load of boxes and we'll say that we've got the telemetry data. As opposed to, I'll get right on it, where's my calculator? No one's going to work out telemetry data. There was no telemetry data. There was no journey. How could there be telemetry data? It's utterly absurd. What else we got on 2001? Space and its oddness.
Picture on screen. I just wonder, like I say, maybe it's predictive programming, etc., but Reflector was just talking. I'm just looking at this picture, and then I thought about the ISS and the Chinese ISS, and how much better Kubrick has tried to deal with the claimed implications of what space is, what it's got, what it's not got. So he sticks a giant spinning wheel so that you can have artificial gravity based on centripetal acceleration. That's the cheap way of not having to do everything floating in free fall, isn't it? But we're now told that for things like the ISS, they don't have this. The living decks aren't put on the outside to attain a false gravity. They're stuck on the inside, but we're also now told, as opposed to Kubrick, where that's weightless up there, these guys aren't weightless. They're in free fall. So there's been a slight change, I think, from 2001 in the rhetoric of what's going off up there. They've had to rethink it, shuffle it, or change Kubrick's slight idea, where this is totally the only way of producing gravity is the rotation. And here we've actually got 8.3 or something gravity, but it's negated by us constantly falling.
Yeah. I mean, the rhetoric has changed within the period of time between 2001 and now. There's been subtle changes. And the changes come from the people. You know, they're the ones who mould the rhetoric. So as much as we might poke fun at convicted, violent, criminal woman beater fight the flat earth, Craig McNeil, when he talks about gravity creating an emergent force of gravity, that type of level of doublespeak, perfectly acceptable within the fantasy realms of heliocentrism, as long as people will swallow it. In other words, that's how the rhetoric comes to pass. So when we say, well, why are we deceived? How have we been deceived? Who deceived us? Well, we all did. You know, if you look at someone like Andrew Thomas Young, he's just some guy that's overcoming his own cognitive dissonance with an explanation with refraction, taken from a flat plane, of course, like everything is. But when you get those types of people and go, well, is he the big bad wolf? No, it's just a dude with cognitive dissonance. Something needs explaining, so he's explained it and stuck it on the internet. You could say the same about Mick West. But those are just people. They're just guys. We started this off by saying, well, what's the reason for the control structures? Well, because the guy next to you's got a little penis. That's why. And he's really terrified that he's going to lose control of all the people. So he tries to emphasize his control through making things seem bigger and badder and worse, making things seem scary. Then you feel that you need that man with a little penis. Depend on him. Now, if he's already duped you and someone tries to turn around and say, no, the man with the little penis has duped you, you'll say, nah, no way I'm getting duped. It's really hard to convince somebody that they've been duped. So they'll brace against it. And in so doing, they come up with new rhetoric on behalf of man with little penis. So the self-perpetuating nature of heliocentrism comes from the fact that, as I've said in other shows, we have a mobile above our crib with all the planets on it. So we're all indoctrinated from birth, basically duped from birth. The moment you start getting schooled in anything, you're getting told about heliocentrism. All the cartoons revolve around it. So you're duped immediately, and you're on the back foot from the moment you start learning about the world and how it isn't, to the benefit of people who want to keep you under control with fear.
Spaceballs. Shut up. It's the Spaceballs. But you're right, yeah. Just from birth, you're given a model on how to view those lights in the sky, right? Before it's even given a context. It's just like, look, this is what you're thinking about. This is what you're looking at. And yeah, you're going to be doing the rest of your life without knowing it.
And because the basics,
Physicality assumption bias.
the basics are understandable by your average layman as well, so they can pass it on to their kid in its basic form and seem smart. So your average 80 IQ numpty tells their kid that they're on a rotating surface and we're moving around the sun. And those basics, which you've been schooled in, can be passed on. And, you know, the kid's looking up to their amazing, intelligent daddy who's explained something complicated that they didn't first appreciate, that didn't match up with how they saw the world. And good job, Dad's here to tell me, or Mom.
Did that open the door
hold
for all
on.
the space movies?
That's not smart. Sorry, Neil. It's not smart. That's educated. It's a big difference. Right?
Well, no, hold on a sec, because there's that when you run into why would they lie, right? It works under the assumption that everyone is lied to them, you know, that everyone has some kind of foul intent behind the information that they've given them and telling it to them wrongly. And the thing is, that's the automatic place to go to for someone in cognitive dissonance, because the idea that those people telling them stuff were no more enlightened than you were when they told you is terrifying.
Well, maybe that could fly back then, but it ain't going to fly now. With all the information out now,
Yeah, but
can't hide behind that anymore.
Well, it's not the information, it's your own fear. So you still suffer from this when you look for affirmation from society, Neil. How long will it be before everyone else aligns with your ideas?
What the heck are you talking? You know, I'm out of here again.
What are you talking about?
No, don't go,
You
Neil.
better not.
But I mean, for the atheist ball believer, like facing that all this trust, they know better. Well, and then you figure out, no, they don't know better. Then you have a weird sensation of like, what have I been trusting in then? And that can also be scary. Like, did I actually trust in God all along? Or did I trust in the devil? Like, it can really screw with you. Like when that cognitive dissonance snaps you out of that worldview of like, oh yeah, no, we got it all figured out. I can trust my fellow humans
Right,
above
and
me.
the society having it all figured out for the dumber people of society, it's one of those few things that they can retain as, well, I know this, which makes me smart, when they're not. And so they'll brace against it when you try and correct something, because it's something so fundamental to their life and existence. Since they've been aware of anything, they've been aware of Earth being a sphere and you being in space with them. So they'll brace against it, because, again, it would make them feel stupid to suddenly not know that which was so fundamental to their life and existence, up until the point that you say, well, that's actually not the case. So they'll get angry quickly.
Good morning, guys.
Hey, Chocolate. 115 people watching.
Morning.
Another warm welcome. And for everybody who's just joined us, thank you very much for coming. You've only come because somebody else has smashed that share button and you've clicked it, because we've definitely not got 115 people watching thanks to YouTube algorithmic love. Please share the show if you've just got here. We're very warm welcome to you all.
So Nathan, you're saying that it's pride, like guys like Fight the Flat Earth and all these other people. You're telling me that pride is holding them back from them recognizing reality?
Yeah, it's a financial investment, but without the money. I mean, it sometimes has money if you've been educated in it. But what I mean is you've invested your time and effort into learning something and understanding something and being able to disseminate it, for someone to come along and say everything you've learned is not correct.
Right.
You go, well,
and
I've got investment in that, so I'm going to fight for it.
And fear. There's fear in there with that pride.
Fear of what?
That's that pride of how did you figure this out and I didn't? How are you the one telling me this? Right? I don't really know why that happens that way, but I've seen it in my face. It's like, why? Who are you? Tell me what's going on. I'm just relating facts to you, bro. Nah. Because I would have known, right? It's always that ego of I would have known already. There's no reason for you to be telling me it's flat or I'm not on a ball. How did you figure that out and I didn't?
But you also get educated in, if someone's telling you it's flat, they're stupid. Just remember, if someone tells you it's flat, they're stupid. Go straight to that if they're ever correcting you. What's that? Earth's flat. You're stupid. Immediately ignore everything you've got to say.
Well, in The Emperor's New Clothes, what would have actually happened probably with that kid yelling that the emperor's naked, the parents would have probably turned to them real quick and said, be quiet. Don't say that. Out of fear.
Yep. Correct.
Because fear has a huge part of control. Pride may keep them from comprehending, but fear keeps them in line.
Well, the bit of incomprehension might come in the form of not shh, don't say that, implying that they understand what's going on. But moreover, he's too young to understand the magical clothes. Just ignore him. He's too young. He just doesn't get it yet. When he's a bit older, he'll understand the magical clothes that he's wearing and how the threads are invisible, but he just doesn't get that yet. We'll explain it to him later. Bless you, little sod. On your way.
Didn't Conspiracy Cats voice that? Right? His fear?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
What is all true?
Well, there's the question everything aspect that comes into play when you realise you've been lied to on this particular front. If they can lie to you about the nature of the very ground you're standing on, what else can they lie to you about, was his sentiment. Well, yeah, you have to consider that, don't you? But denial of that obvious and observable flat plane they've lied to you about when they said it was a globe, that denial can keep you from having to contemplate the fact that you might have been lied to about other things you've taken as read. That was his attitude, basically, yes.
And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where people are like, well, they've lied to me about the ground and they call themselves science. So everything that has to deal with science must be a lie.
Yeah. Judge Dredd said he went through the court process when he threw that person in jail and said they were guilty without any trial. So let's hang the court process. No, Judge Dredd didn't go through the court process. we shouldn't attack the court process. Yeah, but when he said, I am the law, someone afterwards said, so you went through the court process? And he said, yes. So let's get the court process and destroy it, because that's what's causing this problem when Judge Dredd says, I am the law. No, they didn't do science. Yeah, but when we asked them, they said that they were doing science. So let's get science and call it scientism because it's evil. No, they didn't have any. They were just lying. That doesn't mean you chase after science. It means you realise when men lie.
Well, alternatively, they could just pick up that same sword and start using it themselves after decrying it, which would be silly, but
well, that's what happens, isn't it, with ether? You're implying ether. Well, yeah, when I got shut down by the majority of the, let's call them mainstream flat earthers, it would seem here to be intentionally ridiculed by opponents set up to ridicule them. I don't know. Did anybody see the debacle of Flatoberfest, where there's a repeat of the who's that con artist that conned a load of people with Bitcoin recently? Logan Paul, right? He did what someone else did at the most recent Flatoberfest. Just went in and said, yeah, I'm blagging, I'm a flat earther. I got a grand deal if anyone can show it's flat. And he got kicked out. You're like, this has all happened before. What's going on? It's just like going through the motions. If nothing else, the psychopathic nature of the ruling structure means that you see history repeating itself. Narcissists love to recycle. So you see the same things happening. Go on.
He had $1,000 and all he wanted was an angle measurement. Huh?
Yeah, man. I thought that's what I thought. I was like, if I was there, I'd have that grand off him.
Wait, so you're saying this is not the same incident where he made the video? It's different?
We have people in our community that seem to be there to, as John just put it, the start of this conversation was, you could pick up that sword. What sword? The sword of suggesting that you've got science when you haven't. If I am to convince my audience that there is a, let's not say ether, let's say Narnia, just to make it clear what we're talking about. If I say that what we actually exist in is, as we all understand as flat earthers, a flat realm, okay? But that flat realm, in and of itself, exists within the realm of Narnia. You're following along so far? What we all know, let's say it's the azimuthal equidistant projection of a globe, of a flat plane. Well, that is the world that we know, but that exists in Narnia. Therefore, what we actually exist in is Narnia. Now, there are various different parts of Narnia that you can travel to through, I don't know, let's say fourth dimensional wormholes that happen to be attached to wardrobes. Now, if I'm going to convince you of this, which I'm going to be putting my life on the line to say I haven't done if you're in the audience thus far, it's just pepper it with a little bit of what you, the audience, know to be absolute stone cold validity for what I'm saying. Science has shown that we exist within a realm known as Narnia. The Narnia aspect exists around the earth we dwell in. I mean, you could call it the counter space of the realm that we live in, known as Narnia. This has been scientifically validated by, I don't know, the Michelson-Morley experiment. You see how what I'm now bullshitting about has become science really quickly? You're all nodding along now going, really? Narnia realm, you say? Michelson-Morley experiment, you say? Science proven, you say? No, I'm a total charlatan. Maybe go after science, because I've just implied that there's an experiment offering validity to Narnia realms. I mean, it is science after all. No, I'm a charlatan in this instance, aren't I? This context. That doesn't mean I am the law, go after the juries that aren't in existence. There wasn't a method, there wasn't science. I just said there was. See how that works? Now take Narnia out and replace it with ether, and suddenly you'll get the idea of what's going on when John says people pick up that sword of science, blagging that they've got proof of things when it hasn't. Yeah, that happens in Flat Earth too. By charlatans and con artists that have seen a magic trick that they quite like and gone, I could do that. I can say science. Wow, check it out, everyone believes me when I talk about counter space and dielectric incoherent acceleration. I mean, it's amazing how useful that is for a ball with a downward bias also. But that's a different story for a different day. We're talking about 2001 after all.
Especially when you say I believe in science.
Contradiction in terms.
Correct.
What you got up, Adam? Oh, sorry, John. John, go ahead.
I was going to say, interestingly enough, 2001: A Space Odyssey is classified as science fiction.
Absolutely. When, what's the guy who was Kirk? I can't remember the guy's name. Owen's a fan. What's his name?
William Shatner.
William Shatner. I was thinking Bill, what's his name? Right, William Shatner was asked, what's the difference between science fiction and science? And his answer was nothing. There is no difference. What he should have said, or what would be strictly accurate, would be a rephrasing of the question. What is the difference between pseudo-science pretender bullshit claims of heliocentrism and science fiction? Nothing. There is no difference between science fiction and lies about science about space. They're the same thing. That would be accurate. What's the difference between science fiction, that would be fictional non-adherence to a scientific method, and science, well, they're so far removed it's untrue. Science fiction is movie making. Science is the adherence to the scientific method to elucidate the cause of an effect when studying a phenomenon in nature based on a hypothesis. That's a scientific prediction actualized by experiment to then go on to form theory. That would be science. It's so far devoid from science fiction, it's untrue. But according to Bill, they're the same. Because what has actually happened is science has been hijacked by liars who lie about space. Therefore, science fiction about space is the same as pseudoscience about space. Because there's been no scientific method.
I was going to say about 30 years is the difference.
Yeah, when they catch up with the cinematography, it's about the same. That's right. Go on, Adam.
This is science fiction on screen, right? There wasn't a zero gravity toilet. Kubrick's realised we've got a problem. How do you take a shit in space? Yeah, look at his thoughts. I can pull it up. It's a detailed thing of how to get in there, what to do. It's a sonovac. It sucks it out. It does all these different. Yeah, this then goes into play by NASA. Except of course, Kubrick's imagination to solve the problem is a lot more practical and solves the problem. To do it is disgusting. So for NASA to do it, they kind of do a half-arse. Go and look at the NASA toilets. But this is a good example of how science fiction becomes supposed science fact. Somebody invents it in a film, and then you'll see it appear later.
Right. For me,
excuse me, correction.
Red
That would
Dwarf.
be the NASA toilet.
Sorry, chocolate. Go ahead.
/ coffee machine.
My bad, chocolate. Rumpus, all of that. Go ahead one more time.
Sorry. I said that, just a correction. That would be the NASA toilet / coffee machine. Coffee maker. Thank you.
That's what you're drinking, chocolate. That's what you're drinking, isn't it?
I saw that in Red Dwarf.
Yeah, but that's now been done by NASA. That's the same thing. That's what I'm saying. It's about 30 years. You'll see it in a science fiction book, and eventually it'll pop up in mainstream space exploration. Just the simple concept of being able to travel to the moon comes from, is it Jules Verne? It's the first to imagineer that the moon is a place to go. Yeah, he's the one that builds rockets to space. Yeah, it's everything you've ever seen that's portrayed as space fact 30, 40, 50 years before has been imagineered by some science fiction author.
Speaking of the moon, last night, I'm telling you, it was so close. I felt like I could have reached down and touched it. Amazing.
With that, I'm going to say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you for liking, commenting, sharing, joining as a member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
fucking name.